Hello and welcome to the Stuck Mic AvCast. My name is Carl Valerian. I'll be your host today. Today we're going to talk about your multi-engine rating and whether flying a multi-engine is for you, and possibly it's just a fun thing to do is step up to the multi-engine rating. And this is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. We're going to do all sorts of discussions on whether you should get your multi and also whether you should buy a multi and what are the true costs of having a multi-engine rating. Luckily, we have a real diverse crowd here on tonight to talk about those topics and also the fact that together we have like hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of actual multi-engine and multi-engine instruction time. But before we get started, I just want a big shout out to our sponsor, and that's Stratus Financial, Stratus Finance, stratus.finance.com, stratus.finance. They are giving away free scholarships guides. You can find them at stuckmicavcast.com/free if you're looking to get a scholarship to actually move into a career in aviation or you want to get a rating such as the multi-engine rating. Go check them out. Anyway, let's move on to the cruise flight and talk a little bit about, why fly a multi-engine aircraft. So I'm going to go round robin as far as why we should fly a multi-engine aircraft, because we do have a whole gang on tonight, and I'm really excited about that. But I'll give you my opinion first, and then I'm going to let everybody kind of say, where they're at and also why they feel it'd be great to actually get your multi-engine rating and why you should fly. For me, flying a multi-engine aircraft, I fly over the water every so often, so that is my why as far as multi-engine aircraft. I'm here in Lakeland, Florida, and at the Aero Center FBO. Tom Frick, what is as far as why would you want to fly a multi-engine aircraft?
Hey, Carl. So, yeah, I'm traveling night, laying over in, where am I? I'm on Hutchinson Island, Florida, heading for the Keys tomorrow. The multi-engine, other than the obvious, like having two engines, that's probably why I wanted to do it.
I like that one. That's a good one. So, Leslie, what is your reasoning for flying a multi-engine?
Hey, Carl. Hey, everyone. I am in Bentonville, Arkansas, and I am probably the only person on the show that is not multi-engine rated, but I am planning to get my commercial multi-engine add-on in January, February timeframe. So that is just right on the horizon for me. And the reason I am doing it is to expand my knowledge and my experience, and then also maybe open up the door for some different part-time job opportunities.
Awesome. So you have a real purpose for that. That's cool. So James, hey, welcome. And where are you today? And why would you want to get your multi-engine rating?
Hey, Carl. I'm in Sevierville, Tennessee, and for me, it kind of boils down to safety. Most Cirrus owners, view the parachute as they kind of view it as comparable to having a second engine. But ultimately, you've got the safety of having another engine that can, get you through an emergency. So that, for me, going over water, I don't care. Still not, even if I have caps, I still need that second engine.
I'm with you on that one. Russ, how about you? Where are you today, and why do you want to get a multi-engine rating?
Well, I'm in Oklahoma City, but the reason because that's what my employer flies. So important there for job security, right? But I agree with what James said too. And multi-engine aircraft, faster, higher, further, and often safer. But we'll get into that.
Awesome. And Bill, welcome from you're in the balmy north today. And why would you want to get a multi-engine rating?
I am up in Leesburg, Virginia. And why would I? Well, I got a multi-engine rating, and I do a lot of training in it, right? And so I see people who have all kinds of different mission needs. Russ kind of touched on it: farther, faster, higher, carry a lot of stuff, go a long way, get it there. That might just meet your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks. And it was a great intro from everybody. We do have a great big crowd here today, so I do want to get started with a couple of things that we talked about. And a lot of us talked about the safety aspect of it and why fly the multi-engine aircraft. When is a twin safer than a single? So we're going to really kind of do a deep dive into that. And also, when is a twin more dangerous than a single-engine aircraft? And I think, too, we also have to dive into the type of single and multi-engine aircraft. So just kind of start off with, I think both James and I agree on this, is the fact that, having a twin over water is a big benefit because when the other engine fails, you can get to the airport by flying there using an engine. Whereas when an engine fails in a single, you're probably using the parachute, or you're actually going to land somewhere within gliding distance. And that's a big one for me. I'll be honest, I do not think, well, I say this, I've never flown over water in a single engine aircraft. That's not actually totally true. I haven't flown over water where I couldn't see land anymore in a single engine aircraft, because I flew off an island for many years. And my aviation medical examiner reminded me of that fact. He says, "Hey, Carl, you fly out of Peter O. Knight Airport. I fly out of Albert Whitted. I actually lost my engine after I took off, and I wound up in the water. So would you." I was like, "Gosh, you know what? You're right." And there's a lot of people that use flotation devices when they do take off there. So that's actually one of the reasons that a lot of folks will get a multi-engine rating, is actually flying down to the islands and that type of thing. As you know, I used to live down the islands, and a lot of people do. They fly the single-engine aircraft, but that's a big, big selling point. There's another thing, and I just want to give a shout-out to some of our friends that I fly with at the airlines, because they want to put their 2 cents in. There are a couple of folks that I know that actually commute back and forth to work in an aircraft. One of them does it in a Commander. The other one does it in a Twin Comanche. And the one thing the person with the Twin Comanche tells me all the time is that at 11 p.m. flying over the Green Swamp, which is just north of here, if he loses an engine, he's probably not going to go into that swamp, whereas the guy with the Commander is probably going to wind up in the swamp. And I don't like alligators. I'm even more afraid of sharks, and that goes to that thing flying over the water in a twin-engine aircraft and honestly, I still do. I mean, I fly over the water all the time. And I still think about the sharks below us, but it really is kind of interesting, that's for sure. So as far as flying over water in a single engine airplane, let's kind of talk a little bit about that, because I know we're going to get a lot of feedback. And some of us as a matter of fact, Leslie, you can comment on this. You flew off an island for many years. What were your feelings on, and your personal feelings too, as far as flying single engine over water?
It freaked me out, honestly, because back when I was about 22, 23, I almost drowned in a river. So being underwater, if I'm not in control of it, is just, I get really, really anxious about it. So when we started flying in Maui, which, there are times where you are over the shoreline or in the middle of the valley, but I would say probably 400 my hours were like the shoreline over water, because the terrain rises so fast around the islands there that you can't fly over the shoreline very well. So we were usually 1,500 to 3,000 feet off the shoreline flying around. And then you talked about single engine over open water where you can't see any land whatsoever. That's how it is between Oahu and Kauai. I mean, you get mid-channel between those two islands, and you've got about 30 miles behind you, 30 miles in front of you, and you can't see land at all. So you've got to know where you're going and just praying your single engine doesn't fail. So there's a lot to wanting to have that multi-engine aircraft. The funny thing is, in Hawaii, I did not find there's not many people that fly a multi-engine aircraft. It's really hard to even get trained over there. That's why I never got my multi-engine rating. There was only one school that had one aircraft over in Honolulu, and half the year, I think it was down for maintenance. So yeah, that's just where I'm coming from. And that's why now that I'm in Arkansas and have more opportunities, I'm going to get that training down here in the next couple of months.
Leslie, over in Hawaii, they also fly commercially single engine. The Pilatus is a good example, right?
Yes, the Pilatus and the Caravans, Mokulele Airlines, they fly the 208s. That's their fleet. I think they're bringing a multi online here this coming year. But yeah, that's just kind of the way it's done over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, James, you do a lot of flying over the water, but how much of that actually is flying, single engine? I guess we have to, there's qualification here. You do a lot of single engine flying over the water, don't you?
Yeah, so I'll start with so going through Air Force pilot training, they send you to survival school, which includes water survival. And what that taught me was I do not mess with the ocean or sharks or anything. I have a lot of customers talk to me about this, and these are my personal minimums, my 2 cents. But it is a pet peeve when I hear people talk about flying to Mexico, they're just going to go right over the Gulf. And I've had people tell me this. I'm just going to fly right over the Gulf, and if anything happens, I'm going to pull the chute. I'll float down, and I'll just wait for the Coast Guard to come get me. That is legit. I've heard that many times. That is not true. That is not true. You will. There's a very high likelihood that you won't make it out of the airplane alive, or make it out before you drown. There's a very high likelihood that you won't get the raft out of the plane. It'll get stuck. There's a very even higher likelihood if you've never practiced with the raft. And this is assuming that you actually took the legitimate hardware that you would legally need, right? So you let's say you made it out of the aircraft and you got the raft. I would say if you've never practiced getting in a raft in open water, you'd probably die trying to get in it. Honestly, it was the hardest thing going through that training, and then I hate to be kind of morbid with it, but it was a pain. And we're talking about all of us going through at the time we're in our 20s and 30s, in good shape Air Force pilots going through, and we struggled getting in the raft and getting each other in, and immediately they put us in a wave pool. You start getting seasick, and what does that do? It attracts sharks. It starts chumming up the water. So that is a huge pet peeve, and I would say just slow down. And if you're in a single engine plane and you just have the gumption, you want to do it, I don't care. At least get the right equipment and then put it in a pool and practice getting in and out of it and deploying it, and get some actual training in it. And then one other slight piece, the Pilatus single engine, I would view that as safe as a twin engine piston aircraft. The Pilatus, the Pratt & Whitney engine on there has I think there's only one documented failure, and that was recently with, I think, Mike Patey. So I would view a single engine turboprop as safe as a twin engine piston.
Yeah, so that's the other part of this too, is looking at the fact that there is that, survivability after you get down. I went through my survival training at the airline, and I was a chunkier old guy. And it was a little interesting getting out of the water into the raft. So that was a big eye opener. And that's where we have the teamwork. People try to pull you in, that kind of thing. They just gave up on me, but that's a different story. I'd be chum for the sharks. But now let's also be fair to those that own twins, because if you remember a while ago, I had someone on the show that was in the Coast Guard, and he did have somebody that went down in a twin. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, we ran out of gas, so that's an issue with either one. But also, and this has happened, I know only 3, but prop overspeed and couldn't keep altitude. So there is that. But the likelihood of that happening is a lot less than having an engine failure in a single engine airplane. So very, very rare to have that prop overspeed, which will cause you to actually go down in the water. So I get that. Flying over water, single engine, there are ways, and that's not a discussion for today, but there are ways to try to keep yourself safer. And I do want to do a whole episode just on that. I have lots of friends that have actually, flown over water. To your point, James, I've had a friend that had got out of the airplane, no problem. 4 people in a Cessna 172, and it stayed afloat for just a little while. They were able to get out. The reason being is the tanks were empty, so that was one of the reasons they were able to get out. And that's not something you really want to have happen. So that's actually a really good point. When flying a multi-engine aircraft is safer, that's a big point as far as flying over the water. There's also, and I know we're going to get a lot of feedback on this because, I'm going to hear the fact, hey, you're airline guys or you're military and you've got a couple engines, et cetera. You're spoiled, but it's just the fact of the matter is that there are times when a twin is safer. But for the most part, on the general aviation side, I was looking up the statistics for 2022. The accidents that involve multi-engine aircraft, there's a lot more fatalities, and a lot of that has to do with after the engine fails, is actually controlling the airplane. So there is something we need to do, and I'd like to get some feedback from the rest of the folks. It's, we need to train, if we're going to make a commitment to multi-engine aircraft, just like the folks do in the military. Maybe we don't have the budget for that, but at least like the airlines do, or or make a commitment to doing as much as you can training either in a simulator or actually, going out there and flying your airplane. Now, why is that? Because a lot of the twin accidents are about losing control. I used to fly a twin at a very short strip. It was like 1,400 or 1,700. It was really small. I was able to get off the ground, but I knew that if I lost an engine, the one thing I had to do was pull the engines back because there was no way I was going to control that aircraft. And that's just something that's really, really important to know. And one of the things that I think is interesting too is that we don't, a lot of times we think, as just a regular person that's non-flyer, that a twin has to be safer. And that's not really true. And then the stats actually speak towards that. And Bill, who actually I guess works for the NTSB, can you talk a little bit about possibly on the fatality rate on the twins?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Carl. The multi-engine aircraft, all told, have fewer accidents than single-engine aircraft. But of the accidents that they do have, the fatality rate is higher, right? It's normally, just like you say, the loss of control. If you can keep the airplane under control, right? Keep it right side up, get it slowed down, put it somewhere that you intend to put it, rather than what happens with the multi-engine aircraft. And this is something for our listeners that are, maybe unfamiliar with multi-engine aircraft. What are we really talking about here? The big problem with multi-engine aircraft, and this is what we mostly focus on in training, is that when you lose an engine, the problem isn't really that you've lost an engine. It's that you've still got another engine that is actively trying to kill you. It's out there on the wing. It's not providing thrust down the center line. It's trying to roll you over. It's trying to yaw you over and lose control of the aircraft. That's where the fatalities come from. If you hit the ground under control, it's lights out, right? And just as Carl said, with a small piston engine twin, anything under 6,000 pounds piston engine aircraft, there is no requirement that the airplane can climb on one engine. So you're departing maybe a short field, an obstructed field, you lose that engine. There is a window in there where you're just back to where you are in the single. And part of the training is you've got to get yourself really knowing that point where, all right, if I lose an engine between here and here, it's time to just pull them both back, keep control of the airplane, keep it right side up, keep it flying, put it where we want it, which is really the same thing we're doing in a single. We've trained for that for however many hundreds of hours we have in a single. Keep it under control, put it somewhere, rather than try to force it into the air on one engine, lose control. That's when we have the fatality.
Yeah, a lot of training actually, and that's
Exactly.
really important.
Drill
Absolutely.
that over and over.
Over and over. And I know, we do this at the airlines. We're constantly training, and I know in the military they do that. But Russ, I know you recently got yourself a new rating in a jet. But one of the things I'm sure they stress, and I'm sure you do with your students, is you've done a lot of multi-training also, is actually consistent training, isn't it?
Well, it is. And we go through you go through your 10 hours or whatever of multi-engine training, right, to get your add-on, and you do a bunch of engine failures and whatever, simulated stuff, right? But then we, as CFIs, see all the time that where the next time you see that person is 2 years later for their flight review, right? And in a single engine, well, that's not ideal, but, you can usually get away with it. In a twin, there's just more going on, more proficiency that you have to be safe in that scenario. And you can be safe. I mean, an engine failure in a twin is not necessarily a big event if you treat it right, if you're well trained and you're competent. And I mean, professional pilots, like Carl, you go to recurrent training all the time, right? I mean, in a sim, once or twice a year, doing all kinds of stuff, right? And I am in my job as well. I mean, and the type rating you just mentioned, I mean, oh my goodness, how many times did we do engine failures? I don't know, hundreds, I guess. I don't even know. But this recurrent training, so a pilot who's flying all the time, every day, has to go back to recurrent training once or twice a year, right? There's no requirement for that person who owns a Baron, just flies it around to breakfast or whatever, to do anything more than once every 2 years, right? regardless of how much they fly. So you got the person who's flying every day is required to have recurrent training, but the person who isn't flying every day isn't getting the training. And who's the bigger risk, right? So if you are that person who owns a Baron or a Seneca or something, and you're getting good use out of it, and it's a great airplane, but if you're not practicing these skills of engine failures pretty routinely, I mean, we're talking every few months, get together with your instructor and run through some scenarios. If you're not doing that, then are you really as safe as you need to be? That would be the hard question to ask yourself. And there's only so much you can do in the airplane, so highly recommended some kind of a simulator. If you have access to one, I know pretty much any pressurized airplane, Cessna 340 or that kind of stuff, insurance is going to require you to go through some kind of a formal simulator training, and that's real important. I mean, people see it as kind of a maybe a ridiculous requirement or something, but it's really not. I mean, if you think about all the training that pilots like Carl go through all the time, you want that level of training because, who's on board your plane? Your family, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just the airline pilots. Hats off to a lot of the folks that are training out there privately. And I've seen people that train just as much as I do at the airlines on a private basis. And I have a good friend that's an attorney who does that and gets out there, and he'll be doing, multi-engine training all the time, every 3 to 6 months, which kind of brings up another point here that you reminded me of, is the fact that it's not just training, it's also quality training and getting with an instructor that's going to help you, but also an instructor that has some experience and also is safe. A lot of things that we used to do in the past, as far as multi-engine training, we do not do anymore. And things that I used to do and was told by my boss to do, I would probably never do again. But one thing I would highly recommend is, if you are going to train and you're going to do things in an airplane, get another pilot with you, get another good instructor with you, most importantly. And there are some pilots that have a ton of experience in that airplane that it would be good to have them in the airplane when you're looking at stuff, but being with a good instructor is important. I'll tell you why. One of my students decided that they wanted to actually practice doing single engine approaches and then go arounds, single engine in a Duchess. And as he was doing his go around and he was doing the solo, he wound up rolling it and then right into the homes at the end of the runway. And unfortunately lost that student because of that. And that's where, if I wish I could tell him today, hey, get with an instructor and get with a good instructor who's safe, that will actually give you some training. It's going to help you, and it'll keep you actually safer, because sometimes you don't realize what you're doing and it can cause an accident like that. And, James, I tell you, when, we're looking at different, and this is kind of cool because we have airline and some, corporate and all different types of training. In the military, one of the things that's kind of neat is you guys having this unlimited budget. So there's a lot of training that you guys can do that we can't. But still, from a safety aspect, you do keep it safe.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, no one else gets to take a Boeing's, 707 out and do touch and goes. So that it is pretty cool, and we take that very seriously. And but yeah, just to echo on what y'all were saying, I mean, I don't know if I told the story here yet, but I was going to show a picture, but I figured I won't do that. But 2 years ago, somebody bought an Aero Commander and flew it from Florida, didn't really do any flight planning, and wasn't checked out in the plane, and took it right out of annual, put his family in it, and flew it up to decided. I think Gatlinburg just happened to be on the way, but he ran it out of gas coming out on final, and he ran one of the engines out of gas, and decided in landing configuration in a piston plane, gear down, flaps full, he elected to go around, and immediately he was so low to the ground that he didn't just turn right over, so his wing skipped, and then he ended up right in the side of my hangar and my neighbor's hangar as well. So he planted that plane, and the nose fit perfectly between the two of our hangars, and the spars took the blunt of it. The plane didn't catch on fire because it was out of gas, and they somehow walked away. Thank God. Honestly, but it's just, yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That's a pretty interesting story. So
Shut us down
and
for 2 months.
yeah, wow. But lucky, and the issue of not having the fuel is kind of an issue. Also, another thing to mention there, by the way, not just not having fuel, is having the wrong fuel. As you get into bigger airplanes, twins, some people put the wrong fuel in your airplane, and unfortunately lost one of our examiners here locally because of that. They put the wrong fuel in their airplane. But considering that, let's go back to some training. How do you find a good MEI? And let's get into that. Where do you get your we talk about accelerated programs versus not accelerated programs. And I'm going to say this, there are some really good accelerated programs out there that you'll get some amazing training in. And then there are some that you won't. And some people use the term puppy mills. And I know, Bill, you may have a couple comments on that as far as MEI, and how do you figure out if your MEI is well trained?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's hard, Carl. We don't want to name names or stereotype, but the fact is we do have a lot of instructors in the industry out there that have very low time. Maybe all they know is how to check boxes, right? I do a lot of training of instructors and of MEIs now, and make sure that we go above and beyond that. You want to look and make sure that person you are flying with has got, that above and beyond, right? James talked about go rounds. We'll do that. Right? I train all my MEI candidates. We go to those edges where it's beyond the ACS that, my MEIs know what to do if a student really screws up and tries to pull something like a single engine go around too slow. We'll do dual engine flameouts. What happens if they pull the wrong engine back? Certainly that's happened, right? I mean, we've seen that happen in the airline level. A couple of years ago, 737 off of Honolulu, partial engine failure. They got themselves confused, pulled the wrong engine back. Fortunately, nobody was fatally injured in that one, but lost the airplane. We had Taiwan, ATR, pulled the wrong engine back, failed. I know I train my MEIs to that level. I want them to be able to handle that. There's certainly some folks up there that just check the boxes. You want to make sure that look very carefully, because it can go very fast from just basic training to something that can really bite you really hard when we're talking about multi-engine training, at the edge of things like VMC, minimum control speed.
And that brings up a great point, is that and I get it, there's people that just want to get to the airlines. And the philosophy, I think, with that type of training is that you'll get training later on, and you'll have somebody that's next to you that has a lot more experience that's going to help you out. I don't think I espouse that philosophy. I want people to be completely trained before they get to the airlines, because it is interesting, some of the people that you interact with or you fly with that really maybe don't have a real grasp on minimum controllable airspeed. And it really is kind of disconcerting sometimes. So it's not so much the speed, the alacrity of the training. It's more the quality of the training. I think is really important. And like you said, the checking of the box, don't just check a box, because the people we're talking about here, especially at Stuck Mike, are people that are going to be taking their family and friends up flying. And I know they don't want to just check a box. And that's something that hats off to the people that actually listen to the show, because that's what you want to do. You want to become a better pilot, and that's why you're listening. And that's why we constantly are talking about in multi-engine training, it's all about flying single engine. And going back to that point, remember this, that no matter what level, people make mistakes. You were talking about people pulling back the wrong engine. I see people crash every so often at the airline level, and people with 10, 15, 20,000 hours. Sometimes people just get confused. It might be a new airplane. When you're in a new airplane, no matter what it is, it could be a Cheetah, it could be, a 737, 380, whatever it may be. Always approach it like this is something new, and humble yourself and say, I know I have 20,000 hours in a twin, but this is the one I'm in, and this is the one I need to concentrate on, because this is the one that could get me hurt. And no matter how good you are. So sometimes it's nice to get humbled. Let's get humbled in the simulator, or get humbled with an instructor around, so we don't get ourselves hurt. That's for darn sure. As a matter of fact, this is an aside note. I used to let people just crash in the sim when they really screwed up. I did find out, though, that's a little bit too traumatic, especially in a full motion simulator. So I kind of stopped doing that. I do freeze it. I will sometimes let it happen if it happens multiple times, but it does. It's really, no matter what airplane it is, you got to know how to control that airplane on 2 engines. Training. As far as getting training, there are lots of different places that you can find on the internet, but my biggest thing is get a referral as far as flight training is concerned, from friends and from people that you really respect as far as, who you should go to get your flight training in a multi-engine aircraft, and who's going to treat you or teach you to proficiency, and that's really important. Another part of this twin training, and just anybody else has comments on the training part of it, let me know, but I really want to look at, because of the fact that this is a general aviation environment, actually flying and owning an airplane, owning a twin. So that's, I think, something I'd like to kind of morph into. Why would we want a twin? We talked about that. We talked about training, but what's it like really to operate a twin? And I think there's some people here that have actually operated one and have rented them especially. I think that the one thing that I didn't realize, and someone told me this, and I didn't believe them, to be honest with you, at first. I was a lot younger, is that a twin-engine aircraft doesn't cost twice as much. It costs 2.5 to 3 times as much. And I was very skeptical of that, actually, when I first went into this multi-engine thing. And I realized that it is much more expensive. And I'd love to hear James talk about this, but here's the one thing that I realized is that there's 2 engines, but there's also an extra system somewhere that you didn't have. It could just be, an electrical system, or just, it could be a heater. It could be a heater, a janitrol. It could be another type of heater. All of a sudden, I'm managing all these different systems. So that comes into training, but it also comes into an ownership. James, since you have a maintenance shop there, what do people come to you with as far as when they really get shocked as far as how much a twin costs, or what surprises them?
I would say, obviously the price. I'll just say it. The plane. So right behind me at this level, this is Cessna 340, or 414, 420, Piper Navajo. Really, the plane shouldn't leave the hangar for less than $20K total for the annual, where it can very easily be in the 30s and beyond, especially if you're talking about changing an engine. So it is very expensive. And really, what I see, the most common thing is someone owns a Piper Saratoga, or they own a Cirrus, or some sort of single engine plane like that, and they, let's say they spent $300,000 or $400,000 on that plane, and they find a Cessna 340 behind me, and they're like, oh, that thing's $300,000 too, let's buy that. And they just don't realize that just you really hit the nail on the head. It's not just an extra engine. This plane right here behind me has pressurization, and luckily on this one it doesn't have. This one still has electric gear, so props to the Cessna 340. But if you go to a 414, now all of a sudden you've got a hydraulic gear. And then you've got a second hydraulic system that's running your AC system. You've got pneumatic boots. There's just so many other. It's and now like, especially if you go from a Cirrus where you're dealing with just one lever and your mixture. Now all of a sudden you've got 2 throttles, 2 props, 2 mixtures. You've got cowl flaps. You've got pressurization. You've got the boots going on. All the heat. Like you mentioned, that janitor heater up front, it's like, are you serious? That's a blowtorch on the nose. Those are my thoughts. They are fun, and you can take more, fly farther, but in these level of planes, they can kill you so fast. It really, it's not, you can't just go hop in it and go get a hamburger, once a month. You really need to commit to being proficient in the aircraft, and ultimately you're training for the one moment where you lose the engine on takeoff. You need to react violently and immediately. So, and be confident doing it. So, I just those are my general thoughts.
When you were talking, one thing that I thought was interesting, and I think Tom can talk about this, is I think some people think that it might be better to move into a turbine even at some point, because some people have that in their budget, right? But less parts in their mind, less moving parts. But in reality, the cost can go way up. And going back to the acquisition costs, I have a friend, Randy, great guy, bought a King Air for $300,000. Boy, he wishes that's all he spent was $300,000. And I don't even know how much he spent, but I know when it got to 200 to 300, he was getting frustrated as far as the maintenance bill. So now he's into double. But Tom, you actually operate was it a Learjet? And that actually has its own issues as far as maintenance. When you throw those jet engines on there, it can be a lot more expensive, even though it seems like there's less moving parts.
Sure. And with that particular bird, it's actually the engines are the least costly thing on it. The Garrett engines that are on there, they actually run very, very well, and they have regular maintenance cycles and things that we have to do to it over periods of time. And some of it's hourly, some of it's, it's time stuff. Those engines run good, but there's all sorts of other things on that plane that are just, they need to be taken care of on a regular basis. That engine that airplane actually flies very, very well on just one engine. Of all the twin engines that I've ever flown, props and stuff like that, you lose an engine on that Learjet, I don't think the passengers even know that it happened. It'll maintain altitude and it'll get you where you're going, and you can deal with it when you get on the ground. So that's the one thing that's really nice about that particular bird. It's the other pieces that all of the, the A checks, the B checks, the C checks, the D checks, the 12-year, and if those aren't done correctly and over time, there are parts in the plane that I think it was Bill and even James had said, they're just conspiring to kill you, so it's important that it's all taken care of and the resources are put towards that. But when used properly, like everybody said, it's the idea of being proficient in it, and it serves us well in that light, as long as safety is key.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a company came out with they thought the solution to this, and that's the Vision Jet. I mean, that's interesting how much less cost there is than having two engines, but it's not that much less. I've talked to some guys that actually operate that. I'd love to hear more about that because I don't have a lot of experience on the Vision Jet, but that just has the one engine, but you still have a lot more things going on as far as maintenance is concerned. And that brings us to this point. And, I'd like to kind of go through, what is the best twin to buy? Wow, that's a loaded question, isn't it? So I think the best twin to buy is the one that's best for you. And that's a real open, answer to that. And it really depends. It really, really depends. I know that my favorite twin was the one that I was in. But I will say that if I had, a really big budget, honestly, I would love to have a multi-engine turbine like a King Air, just because of the places that I want to fly into. I can get into some really cool short fields and that type of thing. But that'd be something on my list. But let's talk a little bit more practically, because now I am a little more educated on this and realize there's some maintenance involved. I like things like even the Twin Comanche, and there's a lot of different airplanes out there. But there is something else to think about, is carrying people. See, the two engines also allow you to carry more. And in doing that, we can move more things, maybe to the islands or whatever we're doing. The 182 I had was a great hauler, but having a multi-engine, like an Apache or something like that actually was even better. And I had two engines there. So again, you can have two engines, but also those engines, depending on what it is, it could be Rotax, et cetera, could cause you to burn a lot more gas. And that's something that we also didn't really mention, is the fact that you're going to burn a lot more gas. So as far as I'm concerned, a twin engine you have to really look at the distance. You have to look at your mission. If I'm carrying, say, even if it's a short distance, but I'm carrying bricks in the back or tile. I mean, that's what we were moving, was tile. Tile is super, super heavy. So you really have to look at that for an actual, a mission there, as far as, hey, do I need weight or do I want just two engines? Another kind of idea too, and I think, well, actually Bill just mentioned it, is, and we had him on before to talk about it, is a twin that's not a twin. Well, is a push-pull, is a 337. So that's a whole different ballgame. But even at that, there's a lot of training involved in that 337. It's not just like flying a single engine, is it, Bill?
No. And it's strange. So for our listeners who don't know, Cessna made a very interesting twin back in the 1960s. The Cessna 337, in military terms, was called the O2, and it had an engine on the nose, like a regular Cessna, like a 210 or a 182, and then a double boom tail where they could mount an engine in the rear of the fuselage. So both engines were on the same axis. So if you lost an engine, you did not have the adverse thrust that we had. Yeah, Tom is reminding me, the Skymaster was the Cessna has to name everything Sky something, right? So you don't have the adverse thrust that you do with a conventional twin. And, they marketed that as a, safer airplane. But even that airplane has certain things you have to deal with it. I've got quite a bit of time in that. Carl knows we took that, our Warbird version down there to Sun and Fun a couple of years ago. The systems are still very complicated on that. You have heat issues with the rear engine. What happens, if you lose the hydraulics are on the front engine, performance is on the back engine. So there's still a lot of things you have to learn about this. It's not just, I've solved all the problems. I've got two engines and I don't have to worry about that twin engine stuff. You've just opened up a different avenue of training, and it does require training. It's a fast airplane. It's a complex airplane. Personally, I love that thing. Anybody out there with 337 or looking into one, let me know. Good at it, but it is a little bit of a unicorn. But yeah, once we, as Carl and James both said, once you put two engines on, you're also putting on a lot of other things that just exponentially increase that complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into our picks of the week, we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to mention one thing. The 337 you just talked about, what tools do we have out there to decide what twin should be a 337, a Skymaster, et cetera? My favorite tool is it's actually someone's brain, mechanic. The first thing I do when I want to buy an airplane is I go talk to a mechanic, and I hang out for a few minutes, and get the real skinny, start getting into, what's it really cost? And as you talk to them more and more, they'll give you more and more knowledge. I know, James, if I said to you, hey, I want to buy a Duchess, what's the first thing that you would probably say to me? I'm assuming it's going to be parts is one of the things, right? I got to go there. But it's one of my favorite trainers, but it's one of the things that people always tell me, hey, you got to worry about the parts. But that's one thing you need to do is go grab your mechanic and say, hey, this is what I think as far as maintenance is concerned on this airplane. You need to be aware of that. There's also lots of other things online as far as groups, et cetera. So there's type groups out there, and that's something that I really think is important. Cessna has a group out there. Bonanza Society has one. They actually talk about barons in there. There's also groups out there like the CB, the Twin B. Those are groups that are out there that you can talk to as far as, what do I need to do to maintain this aircraft? What are my challenges going to be? So again, my favorite thing to do is talk to a mechanic. And as far as other things, I don't know if anybody has some, what else could we get from, people and tools that are out there. Tom, do you have any tools that you've used when you're considering buying a twin airplane or making suggestions?
Yeah, it's, you've already mentioned it. It's mission, mission, mission. What are you going to do with the plane? You got to start there. And then, yes, you got to go talk to the mechanics. And I go through mechanics like I go through doctors. I don't just take the first opinion, It's like you go find somebody else because this guy, he's like, oh, no, this thing's a parts hog. And like, oh, no, you'll love this plane. And there's opinions out there all the time. So I try to talk to several different mechanics on, what is the skinny on this particular aircraft and how is it going to serve me? And how is it going to serve the mission that I want, which is what I started with, ultimately, we've all been flying long enough to know that all things in aviation are relative, If you're looking for that discount, perfect machine that's going to get you down the road and not cost you a whole lot, and it's going to be perfect, and it's not going to have high maintenance costs, I don't know, I'm still looking for that bird. It's I don't know it's still, I don't know that it's out there. But at the same time, again, if I have a certain mission and I know what I'm going to be using this airplane for on a regular basis, that narrows it down. Now you have selections that are going to fit into that peg hole or whatever, and then you can figure out which one of those aircraft are going to work best for you, maintenance-wise and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to have about 3 different airplanes. You should have a twin for doing your overwater flying, a little aerobatic plane, and possibly a jet so you can go super fast, and something that's maybe an aerobatic jet. But either way. But that's a whole other conversation. Before we move on to the picks of the week, I know there's someone here who's dealt with a lot of mechanics, not a mechanic herself, but I'd like to hear your feedback as far as what you have encountered dealing with mechanics and looking at different airplanes.
Well, Carl, just like you said, your mechanic is your best avenue, your best tool and resource, I think, personally, when you're looking for not just a twin aircraft, but any aircraft. It's really all encompassing. You got to look at your mission. You got to look at your budget, what the maintenance costs are going to be. We have to look at insurance, because when you're talking about twin aircraft, there's a lot of insurance constraints or requirements that you're going to have. That's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost extra time with training that, yes, you're going to need and is advisable, but insurance costs and but yeah, working with mechanics, I mean, that's one thing that early on, even before I was doing my private pilot training, we owned a maintenance shop here in Arkansas that I managed the shop, and I was doing work orders and worked hand in hand with those mechanics. So I got to see, 8 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week, what their opinions were. And of course, they all had different opinions, but, our clients would come into the shop and, they would just kind of throw up their hands or roll their eyes on certain makes and models. And I mean, they just couldn't stand working on them. And so all through the years, I kind of made these mental notes. All right, when I'm ready to buy this aircraft or get a retractable gear aircraft, this is the one I want to get. This is the one I don't want to get because, it was this certain one that I saw in the shop all the time, week after week. But that was just my experience. And there are going to be pros and cons to anything that you look at. But again, you just need to look at your budget, maintenance, insurance, talk to your MEI about it, talk to, different flight schools, those different aircraft type societies, even online forums. You can get, maybe you can get some good feedback there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that we've talked about multi-engine aircraft, from flying them, staying safe, and purchasing them. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if you're considering getting some training in flying an aircraft, if you're considering buying an aircraft, there's a lot that you need to do. Of course, if you have questions, stuckmikeavcast@gmail.com. We have mechanics on here, flight instructors, etc. Please let us know. Go to our Facebook page, reach out to us, and also, well, I'll preface this. There's a new community we have that's coming up. I don't want to say too much about it, but we started one with our sister podcast, and it has just been wonderful. And it's just like this, just the things that you want to know and have a deeper dive on, or you want to ask a personal question of us. But we'd love to hear your questions on what we talked about and your opinions, too, as far as a multi-engine. Are you going to get a multi-engine rating? Are you going to buy a multi-engine? Let us know. Well, let's move on to the after landing checklist and the picks of the week. And the picks of the week, I know I got feedback from someone already online. Why is it that the picks of the week aren't every week? Well, the picks of the week are this week that we're recording, so that's why we call it the picks of the week. Thank you so much for that. I shouldn't say the person's name, but thank you for the feedback on that, because some people will know who it is. Anyway, let's move on to the picks of the week, which are this week's picks of the week, and that is, for me, that would be the Complete Multi-Engine Pilot. I think this is a really cool guide. And I have a link, by the way, in the show notes that'll bring you over there to purchase that. It's actually by Bob Garner, and it's been updated. I like the fact that it's been updated and has a tectum on the cover. So it's going to talk about some other different types of twins and some of the things that we just talked about it right here. The Complete Multi-Engine Pilot, not just about training, but also about actually owning an airplane. So you can check that out in Amazon or in the link below. And that's my pick of the week. Okay, next, who is Bill? Bill, next, what is your pick of the week?
All right, I've got another pick of the week on some training as well from, just like Bob, a very, long-time trainer. Video from Doug Rosendahl. Doug's all over the place in general aviation. He is one of the who's who's out there, warbird trainer, tail dragger trainer, everything. And he got together with Martin Pauly, who's a very well-known YouTube personality, and they did a multi-engine ground school. Just the two of them talking in the hangar, and it is probably the ground school. I mean, yeah, I'm at a 141 school. We have an official ground school, but I give everybody that video. Everything you need to know about multi-engine flying is in there. Doug Rosendahl, it's called The Ground School. He's got a couple other videos with Martin as well called The Drill. Fantastic. Really, really gets you up to speed on multi-engine flying.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That's a wonderful pick of the week, and it's actually a lot of fun to listen to. Really interesting. It's a little geeky, but it's a lot of fun and really interesting. Leslie, what is your pick of the week?
Well, most of our listeners know that many of us are big fans of the FAA Wings Pilot Proficiency Program, and there is a course out there. There are many multi-engine courses, but one that you should check out that won't take too much of your time, but has really good foundational information or a nice review is ALC-30, and that's the Multi-Engine Safety Review. So that's the FAA Wings course, AL30. Multi-Engine Safety Review. Encourage all of you guys to go check it out.
Yeah, we got a link below and you can find it there. Thanks for that. FAA Wings program. Great stuff. Tom, what is your pick of the week?
Yeah, Carl, I picked a book that I was using when I started originally on my multi-engine and used it through my MEI. It is called The Multi-Engine Pilot Flight Maneuvers. And what I really liked about this book was how it's set up, and as an instructor, I appreciate this. It's set up like a lesson plan, So I mean, every one of the things in it has, an objective, completion standards, descriptions, procedures, and then backed up with all sorts of references and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of geeky too, but I still use it to this day. It's great for reference for me to go back to when we start doing maneuvers and training. So yeah, it's a great little manual.
Yeah, it's an awesome book, and one of my favorite things has one of my favorite airplanes on the cover, and that's the Duchess, the Beechcraft Duchess, and that's actually one that James laughed at me when I said that I was interested in buying. James, what is your pick of the week?
Yeah, so my pick of the week is the Distinguished Flying Cross Association. Over this past week, I was deeply humbled to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross, the nation's fourth highest award, the highest for flying achievement, and 3 behind the Medal of Honor. Similar people are Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh, Buzz Aldrin. But this association came out and they met us. And, it was one of my missions when I was deployed this past summer that I received it for. Obviously my story is nowhere close to what these people had gone through. And this association, they go to all the air shows and they'll meet up. And they just took us in. We could sit there and just listen to their stories, right? So a lot of aviation is hangar flying. So just listening to the stories of the different members of this association. If you love flying and you love war stories and stuff like that, and it's really awesome. Look it up and look at their the stories and carry on the tradition.
Absolutely. And by the way, congratulations on that. We're going to have you back on and have you talk a little bit about that. Hopefully you can do that. And I think that's really cool. So congratulations again on the Distinguished Flying Cross, and that's awesome. And Russ, let me guess, what is your pick of the week? It probably has to do with a book, maybe?
It is a book. It's actually a pretty interesting book if you're kind of like a techie kind of guy. It was titled Night Intruder, a personal account of the radar war between the RAF and the Luftwaffe night fighter forces. It's some memoirs of World War II, but it's about these night fighters that the RAF was trying to field, and how do you find the enemy at night? We use radar. So a lot of it was about the real early implementation of airborne radar, and I mean, just amazing. I mean, sometimes it could tell an airplane was out there, but not where, and fun things like the antennas weren't very directional. So if you were a mile above the ground, the radar would only work out to about a mile because otherwise it'd pick up the ground clutter, right? So your range on the radar depended on how high above the ground you were, stuff like that. Pretty interesting, the development they went through for airborne radar.
Awesome. Well, thanks. That's actually really, really cool stuff, especially people that want to put radar in their aircraft. I know there's been a couple of articles about that in general aviation aircraft and putting radar in your aircraft. It's not a bad idea, a little bit of an expense, but maybe we'll do that on another episode. Thanks for the picks of the week, guys. This has been awesome. By the way, if you're looking for us, there's a couple shows that we will be at. We are definitely going to Sun and Fun, of course. That's on April 1st to the 6th. Also, Redbird Migration. I may be there, and a couple other people from the Stuck Mike AvCast will be there. Definitely look for us there. Also, if you have questions, stuckmikeavcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook and go out there and talk to us about the different things that we've talked about here. If you have questions or you have opinions, that type of thing, look for our new community. That's actually to be coming up here shortly. And if you're thinking about getting a multi-engine rating, I really would highly recommend checking out that scholarships guide. And you can get one for free at stuckmikeavcast.com/free and use the coupon code STRATUS. And our sponsor of this show, Stratus Financial, is giving away a scholarships guide for anybody who's looking for a free guide so they can get their multi-engine rating. There's lots of folks out there that want to help you achieve your goal of actually getting your multi-training or any other type of rating that's out there. So check that out at stuckmikeavcast.com/free and use the coupon code STRATUS. But most importantly, do something today to move forward in your life as far as a pilot. It might be something just like this, listen to podcasts, watching it on YouTube, that type of thing, reading the books that we talked about. But I think it's really important that even if you're not flying, to get out there and enjoy aviation in other ways. And those ways are reading, watching, listening, and actually being involved in the aviation community. Well, folks, we'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.